Let's be honest, worry is sneaky. It's that silent storm that shows up in the middle of your peace. It doesn't knock, it doesn't ask permission, it just shows up. And before you know it, your mind is racing, your heart is pounding, and your spirit feels like it's stuck in a traffic jam with no way forward. But here's what I came to tell somebody today: worry is not your portion. Peace is. God didn't create you to carry what only He can handle. That weight you've been dragging around, that anxiety that won't let you sleep, that fear that's got your future in a chokehold. You were never built for that. And the reason you feel like you're breaking down is because you've been trying to manage something that was meant to be surrendered. Some of us are praying for peace, but still holding on to worry like it's our last lifeline. But real peace doesn't come from control. Real peace doesn't come from figuring everything out. Real peace starts where your control ends. That's why God says, "Be still and know that I am God." Not be strong. Not be smart, not be strategic, just be still, because your stillness is a signal to heaven that you trust the one who holds it all together even when it feels like everything's falling apart. And I know what you're thinking. But I've got real things to worry about. I hear you: bills, health, family, your own thoughts. But let me ask you something. When has worrying ever solved it? Worry gives you motion, but no progress. Activity, but no peace. It keeps your hands busy, but your heart empty. And if the enemy can't destroy you, he'll distract you. He'll get you so caught up in the what-ifs that you miss the what-is. The fact that God is still on the throne, still in control, and still working all things together for your good. Here's the problem, though. We've gotten so used to anxiety that we don't know what to do with peace. Peace feels foreign. It feels like something's missing when really it's something's been given. Peace isn't the absence of problems. Peace is the presence of a person. You don't need every situation to calm down if you know the one who calms the storm with just one word. Remember when the disciples were in the boat and the storm hit? They panicked. The waves were crashing, the wind was howling, and Jesus, He was sleeping. Don't miss that. He was resting in the middle of what they were freaking out about. Because when you know who's in your boat, the storm doesn't get the final say. Jesus didn't just calm the storm around them. He was showing them the storm within them, the one that's louder than thunder. The storm of worry, but He stood up, and with one word, peace, everything changed. That's the kind of peace God wants to give you, not the temporary, shallow, circumstantial peace, but the peace that passes all understanding. The peace that doesn't make sense to people around you. The peace that shows up when the diagnosis is bad, but your faith is still good. The peace that sits with you in the middle of the chaos and whispers, "I've got this." But here's the catch. You can't embrace His peace and hold on to your worry at the same time. One has to go, and the choice is yours. You don't have to live another day in the prison of anxiety when the door has already been unlocked. All you have to do is walk out of your fear, walk out of your stress, walk out of your self-reliance, and walk into His promise. Cast your cares on me because I care for you. When you surrender your worry, you're not giving up. You're giving it to God. You're saying, "Lord, this isn't mine to carry." You're handing Him the weight that's been holding you hostage. You're choosing freedom over fear, faith over control, trust over torment, and don't get it twisted. Surrender isn't weakness. Surrender is warfare. It's you saying, "I refuse to be ruled by something that didn't create me, didn't call me, and can't keep me." Surrender is the most powerful thing you can do because it places the battle back in the hands of the one who's never lost a fight. So today, let this be your declaration. I will not let worry rule me. I will not let fear have me. I will not carry what God has called me to release. Peace doesn't begin when the storm ends. It begins when you surrender control to the one who commands the storm. That right there flips the whole script, because we think peace is the reward that comes after everything works out, after the money comes in, after the diagnosis changes, after they apologize, after the struggle ends. But real peace, God's kind of peace, it doesn't wait for the storm to settle. It shows up right in the middle of the chaos, while the thunder is still crashing, and the wind is still howling, and the waves are still rising. Peace doesn't need the storm to shut up. It just needs you to let go. That's why Jesus didn't wait for the disciples to feel secure before he calmed the storm. He waited until they were desperate enough to realize they couldn't fix it on their own. Some of us are begging God for peace, but we're still trying to maintain control over the outcomes. We say we trust him, but we're still refreshing our bank apps, still reading into every text message, still losing sleep over things we can't change. That's not surrender, that's spiritual micromanaging, and God can't fill what you won't empty. He won't invade the space you're still trying to control. Peace isn't a feeling, it's a decision. It's not passive, it's powerful. It's that unexplainable calm that sits down in your soul. Even when nothing around you makes sense, it's when your heart says, God, I don't like this. I don't understand this. I wouldn't have chosen this, but I'm not fighting it anymore. I trust you more than I trust my plan. That's where peace is born, not in the absence of the problem, but in the presence of God. So often we think that when the external noise dies down, then we'll feel peace. But the truth is, sometimes God allows the storm to continue so we'll learn to listen for his voice over the volume of our circumstances. When Jesus calmed the storm, he didn't start with the sea. He started with the disciples' hearts. Why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith? In other words, your storm is loud, but your unbelief is louder. Your situation is scary, but your perspective is what's really stealing your peace. The devil isn't just after your mind. He's after your ability to rest in what God already said. Because if he can convince you to panic, he can keep you from hearing the promise. And the enemy knows that if you ever stop reacting and start releasing, if you ever stop clinging and start surrendering, he loses his grip. Because peace is dangerous to the kingdom of darkness. A peaceful believer is an unstoppable believer. You can't manipulate someone who's surrendered. You can't pressure someone who's already laid it all down. You can't control someone who's anchored in God's word and not their own understanding. But surrender takes faith. It takes bold, ridiculous, raw faith to say, God, I know what the doctor said, but I still believe you're my healer. I know what my bank account looks like, but I still believe you're my provider. I know I feel alone, but I still believe you're with me. A faith doesn't ignore the facts. It just refuses to let the facts dictate the atmosphere of your heart. That's what surrender looks like. It's not denial, it's declaration. It's saying, I see the storm, but I choose peace. I see the storm, but I know who's in my boat. And here's the key. When you surrender control, you make room for his authority. When you step back, he steps in. When you let go, he shows up. Some of us are so busy trying to be God in our own situations that we're blocking the very help we've been praying for. God isn't looking for your strength. He's not waiting for you to figure it out. He's waiting for your surrender. That's where his power shows up, in your weakness, not your wisdom. Peace comes from proximity. The closer you are to him, the less the storm can shake you. The reason some of us feel overwhelmed isn't because God has left us, but because we've wandered too far trying to fix things on our own. We've let the problem become louder than the promise. We've let fear drive the car, and we've pushed faith into the back seat. But God is calling you back to the place where you stop striving and start resting, not resting in ignorance, not resting in passivity, but resting in confidence, confidence that he is good, confidence that he is faithful, confidence that he is bigger than what's breaking you. It takes courage to surrender. It takes courage to trust that what you release God can redeem, that what you let go of he can carry, that what you hand over he will handle, and even when the outcome doesn't look like what you wanted, his peace will guard your heart and mind, not your logic, not your timeline, not your need to be in control. His peace will guard you like a soldier standing watch over your soul, saying, no anxiety allowed here, no fear allowed here, no panic allowed here. That's the power of surrender. It puts peace on the throne and kicks worry off it. So if you're waiting for the storm to stop before you have peace, you're missing the point. God is offering peace in the storm, not just after it. He's inviting you to step out of the boat of self-sufficiency and walk toward him on the waters of surrender, to do something irrational in the eyes of the world, but deeply spiritual in the eyes of heaven, to surrender, not because you're weak, but because you know who's strong, to stop trying to calm the sea and start trusting the Savior who commands it with a whisper. You can't hold on to worry and receive peace at the same time. One must be released for the other to reign. It's like trying to grab hold of the light while still clinging to the darkness. They don't coexist. One drives the other out, and many of us are standing in the middle, praying for peace, crying out for peace, but never releasing what's taking up the space peace is meant to fill. Worry is a full-time tenant in some of our hearts, occupying every corner, dominating every thought, and there's no vacancy for peace to come in because we haven't evicted what's been living there too long. We say we trust God, but we live like we're the ones responsible for everything working out. We sing songs about surrender on Sunday, and then walk right back into Monday trying to micromanage everything and everyone around us. But peace doesn't respond to performance. It responds to permission, and God is not going to force his peace into a place that's already occupied by your fear. He's too kind for that. He's too patient for that. He waits for the invitation that only surrender can extend. You're not weak for worrying, but you are weary. Worry doesn't make you sinful, but it will make you stuck, and the longer you grip it, the heavier it gets. Worry is a weight that was never meant to be carried. It doesn't come with grace. God gives grace for obedience, not anxiety. So when you're carrying what he never assigned, don't be surprised when you feel exhausted. Peace is available, but it won't compete. It's not going to fight for space in your soul. It waits to be chosen, and you've got to choose it, not once, but daily. Every time fear tries to rise, you respond with faith. Every time anxiety tries to speak, you remind it that peace has already been given authority. Some of us are feeding our worry and starving our peace. We're meditating more on the problem than the promise. We're scrolling through bad news and wondering why our spirit feels heavy. We're obsessing over outcomes and forgetting the one who already knows the end from the beginning, and then we sit and wonder why peace feels distant. But peace was never the problem. Our focus was. What you magnify will multiply. What you focus on will grow. And when your mind is locked on what could go wrong, there's no space left for what God says will go right. Peace doesn't mean nothing's happening. It means everything can be happening and still you're not moved. Not because of who you are, but because of who you belong to. It's not the absence of pressure, it's the presence of confidence. Confidence that God is in control even when you're not. Confidence that your emotions don't have the final word. Confidence that God is faithful, even when it feels like everything is falling apart. But confidence can't grow in soil that's saturated with fear. Faith and fear can't share the same bed. One of them has to leave. We try to carry both like it's possible. We want the assurance of peace while still gripping the illusion of control. But control doesn't produce peace, it kills it. The more control you demand, the less peace you'll have. Because peace is birthed out of trust, not strategy. And if your peace is based on how well you can manage your situation, then it will rise and fall with every shift in your circumstances. But when your peace is rooted in the unchanging character of God, nothing can shake it. Not the doctor's report, not the bank balance, not the silence from heaven. Because peace doesn't come from outcomes. It comes from surrender. Letting go is terrifying when you've trained yourself to survive by holding everything together. It feels unsafe. It feels reckless. It feels irresponsible. But that's only because you've gotten used to chaos. And peace will always feel unfamiliar when your normal has been fear. But just because it feels unfamiliar doesn't mean it's wrong. Sometimes what's foreign is actually what's been missing. Sometimes peace doesn't show up in a loud, dramatic moment. It whispers, "Let me in." While you're still clutching your worry like a security blanket, there's no peace in the place of pretense. You can't fake surrender. God sees past your words into your heart. You might say, "I trust you," with your lips, but if your hands are still clenched and your thoughts are still racing and your decisions are still driven by fear, then peace will wait until you're ready to truly let go. Because peace isn't emotional comfort, it's spiritual alignment. It's a divine exchange. You give him your worry, he gives you his rest. You release your fear, he replaces it with his presence. But the exchange can't happen if your hands are full. What you refuse to release will resist the peace that's trying to reach you, and let's be real, it's a battle. Sometimes it's a moment-by-moment decision. Worry doesn't just leave because you prayed once. Sometimes you have to pray 10 times in 1 hour. Sometimes you have to fight to stay surrendered. But every time you do, you're training your soul. You're telling your fear that it's no longer in charge. You're building muscle memory for trust. And eventually, what felt unnatural starts to become your new default. You wake up and instead of obsessing over what could go wrong, you begin your day with expectation of what God is going to do, but none of that starts until you make the choice to release. You can't just rebuke worry, you have to replace it. Replace the lie with the truth, replace the panic with praise, replace the need to control with the willingness to trust, because worry is a thief, but peace is a gift, and it's a gift that's already been bought for you, already been promised to you, already been spoken over you. The question isn't whether peace is available. The question is whether you're willing to clear the space so it can live where worry used to. Surrender isn't giving up, it's giving it to God, trusting that His hands are stronger than your anxiety. That's where everything shifts. That's the moment your strength meets its limits and finally learns to rest in something greater. We've been trained to see surrender as weakness. To wave the white flag means we've failed. To stop trying means we've lost. But in the kingdom of God, surrender is not defeat. It's alignment. It's not quitting. It's choosing to place what you can't control into the hands of the one who never loses control. You don't lose when you surrender to God. You win peace. You win clarity. You win rest. Anxiety thrives where trust dies. It grows in the soil of self-dependence. It feeds off the belief that if you don't hold it all together, it will all fall apart. But here's the truth that will set you free. You were never called to hold it all. That was never your assignment. That was never your weight to carry. Some of the exhaustion you're feeling isn't because you're not strong enough. It's because you're carrying things that belong in God's hands, not yours. You're trying to manage what only a miracle can fix, and it's not working because it wasn't meant to work that way. There comes a moment where surrender becomes survival. Not the survival of your plans, but of your soul, where you say, God, I can't do this anymore in my own strength. I'm tired of pretending. I'm tired of performing. I'm tired of controlling outcomes that were never mine to decide. That moment may look like weakness on the outside, but in the spirit, that's the beginning of breakthrough. That's the moment heaven leans in. That's the moment peace enters the room. It's not about figuring everything out before you let go. Surrender isn't neat. It's not always pretty. Sometimes it looks like tears in the middle of the night. Sometimes it looks like silence when you don't have the words. Sometimes it looks like letting go of a plan you were convinced was perfect. But surrender is not about understanding. It's about obedience. It's about believing that God knows what you don't, sees what you can't, and loves you too much to let you keep driving yourself into the ground trying to play God in your own life. Trust is the engine of surrender. Without trust, surrender turns into passive resignation. But when you trust who He is, you don't need all the details. You don't need to know how or when, just that He will. You stop asking God to explain, and you start asking Him to lead. That shift in your spirit, that's where the peace begins to flow, not because everything's fixed, not because the storm has stopped, but because the weight has moved. And when the weight moves from your shoulders to His, the difference is undeniable. God's hands are steady. His hands are strong. His hands don't tremble under pressure. His hands have held galaxies and still have room for your brokenness. His hands caught Peter when he was sinking. His hands touched lepers when no one else would. His hands broke the bread and multiplied what wasn't enough. His hands were nailed to a cross so yours could be free from the chains of fear. So why are you still holding your life like you're the only one capable of carrying it? What could happen if you trusted Him enough to release what's been draining you? Sometimes we hold on to anxiety like it's a responsibility, like we're doing something noble by worrying, like we're proving how serious we are. But worry doesn't make you more spiritual, it just makes you more exhausted. You can pray and still worry, but the power shows up when you pray and release, when you lay it down and don't pick it back up 5 minutes later, when you say, God, this is yours, and you mean it, not just in emotion but in action, in the way you talk, in the way you think, in the way you choose peace when panic tries to call your name. Surrender is worship. It's saying, you're God and I'm not. It's lifting your hands not just in song but in surrender. It's choosing trust when trust feels like the riskiest thing you've ever done. But it's not risky when you know who you're surrendering to. He's never dropped what's been placed in His hands, not once, and He won't start with you. We don't surrender because we have to. We surrender because we get to. Because we've come to know the love of a Father who sees every part of us and still calls us His own. A Father who isn't overwhelmed by our fear, who isn't irritated by our questions, who isn't disappointed in our struggle. He just wants our heart, and surrender is how we give it to Him. It's not always instant. Sometimes it's a process. Sometimes it's daily. Sometimes it's moment, but every time you surrender, you grow stronger, not in self-reliance, but in God, dependence, and that's the strength that can't be shaken. That's the strength that builds peace like a fortress around your soul. The enemy wants you to think surrender is a sign of failure, but really, it's the beginning of freedom, because as long as you're holding on, you're in bondage to the outcome. But when you let go, you become available for God to move however He wants, and He always moves with purpose. He always moves with love. He always moves with peace. Anxiety wants to be your master. It can't coexist where surrender has taken root. It loses its grip when you choose trust. It loses its voice when you choose faith. It loses its power when you say, God, I'm giving this to you. Not because I understand everything, but because I trust you with everything. That's surrender. That's strength. That's the door to peace that no worry can close.